Ethan's scream died in his throat as the massive bear charged directly at him, its roars promising death in the isolated wilderness. In that frozen moment, a pregnant bobcat, a wild predator with her own life and unborn kittens at stake, hurled herself between them with a protective fury that defied every law of nature. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The ancient pines of Blackwater Forest whispered secrets as dusk painted the sky in fading hues of amber and violet. Here, in the heart of Montana's wilderness, the boundary between civilization and untamed nature remained as thin as morning mist. For creatures of the forest, twilight marked the delicate transition when predator and prey exchanged dominion over the land. But on this particular evening, as shadows lengthened across the forest floor, nature's carefully balanced order was about to witness something extraordinary. Something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about wild animals and their instincts. Through the undergrowth, barely visible among the ferns and fallen leaves, a small spotted form moved with deliberate grace. Luna, a female bobcat heavy with her first litter, navigated the familiar territory she'd claimed as her own. At 30 pounds, she was larger than most females of her species, her tawny coat marked with distinctive black rosettes that seemed to shift and change as she moved through patches of dappled light. Despite her advanced pregnancy, she moved with a silent precision that made bobcats such effective hunters. Luna paused, her tufted ears swiveling to catch the slightest sounds. Something was different. Something was wrong. The forest had gone unnaturally quiet. No birdsong, no chattering squirrels, just the hollow whisper of wind through pine needles. Her whiskers twitched as she tested the air, her keen senses detecting an unfamiliar scent carried on the breeze. Human, young, and something else. Fear. 5 miles away at the ranger station that served as the eastern gateway to Blackwater National Park, Ranger Jack Harding was preparing to end his shift when the call came in. "Blackwater Station, Harding speaking," he answered, cradling the phone against his shoulder as he finished logging the day's visitor count. "Jack, it's Andrea Wilson from Dispatch." The voice on the other end was tense, professional. "We've got a situation. 6-year-old boy, Ethan Reynolds, separated from his parents approximately 90 minutes ago during a day hike on Pinecrest Trail." Jack's hand froze over the keyboard. Pinecrest Trail wound deep into the more remote sections of the park. As the senior ranger with 15 years of experience in these woods, he knew what happened to those who got lost after dark. "Parents are frantic, as you'd expect," Andrea continued. "Local sheriff's deputies are on site, but given the terrain, they've requested our assistance. Search and rescue team is mobilizing, but you're closest." "I'm on my way," Jack said, already reaching for his gear. "Tell them to stay put at the trailhead. Last thing we need is more people lost in those woods." As Jack hurried to his truck, his mind was already mapping the area, calculating how far a frightened 6-year-old might wander in 90 minutes. The temperature would drop fast once the sun disappeared completely. And then there were the predators, mountain lions, wolves, and most concerning, the black bears currently in hyperphagia, aggressively foraging before winter hibernation. What Jack couldn't know was that little Ethan Reynolds had already wandered far deeper into the forest than anyone could have imagined, driven by a child's misguided certainty that if he just kept walking, he'd find his way back to his parents. Tears streaked Ethan's dirt-smudged face as he stumbled forward. His bright red jacket, the one his mother had insisted he wear, "so we can always spot you," was torn at the sleeve where he'd caught it on a branch. His small Spider-Man backpack contained only an empty water bottle and half a granola bar, the latter of which he'd already eaten in frightened, desperate bites. "Mom," he called out, his voice small in the vastness of the forest. "Dad?" But the only answer was the echo of his own words and the rustle of leaves underfoot. The boy had no way of knowing he was being watched. From 50 yards away, concealed in the shadows beneath a rocky outcropping, Luna the bobcat observed the strange human cub with cautious curiosity. She had encountered humans before. They occasionally passed through her territory on the marked trails, but never one so small, and never one alone. In her current state, heavy with kittens that could arrive any day, Luna's natural instinct was to avoid any potential threat. Yet something about the frightened human child triggered another response in her, a recognition perhaps, of vulnerability that mirrored her own. A mile east of Ethan's position, something else moved through the forest, something much larger and far more dangerous. The 500-pound male black bear had caught the scent of the boy, a combination of sweat, fear, and the lingering sweetness of the granola bar. In the bear's food-obsessed pre-hibernation state, any potential meal was worth investigating. Back at the trailhead, chaos had given way to organized urgency. Jack Harding conferred with the sheriff's deputies and the boy's parents, a pale, shell-shocked couple who clung to each other as if afraid they too might become separated. "He's just so small," Ethan's mother Rebecca said, her voice cracking. "He's never been alone like this." "We only looked away for a minute," his father David added, the guilt heavy in his voice. "He was right behind us, and then he wasn't." Jack nodded, his expression professionally reassuring even as concern gnawed at him. The light was fading faster now, and with it, their chances of finding the boy before nightfall. "We're going to find him," Jack promised, checking his equipment one last time. "I know these woods better than anyone. Your son is wearing bright red, which helps, and children who get lost typically follow paths of least resistance, downhill along streams. That narrows our search area considerably." What Jack didn't say was that frightened children rarely responded to searchers' calls, often hiding instead from the unfamiliar voices, or that the coming darkness would bring temperatures too cold for a child to survive without shelter. Some truths were better left unspoken. As the search party prepared to move out, Jack felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. In 15 years as a ranger, he'd led dozens of search and rescue operations, but the ones involving children always hit hardest. Success meant reuniting families. Failure meant delivering news that would shatter lives forever. Deep in the forest, Ethan had finally stopped walking. Exhaustion and fear had taken their toll, and the boy sank down at the base of a massive pine tree, drawing his knees to his chest. The forest around him had transformed from a place of adventure to one of terror as daylight slipped away. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound a potential threat. "I want to go home," he whispered, fresh tears welling up. "Please, I just want to go home." From her hidden position, Luna watched the human child with growing concern. Her instincts as a predator told her to remain hidden, to protect herself and her unborn kittens. But another instinct, one more mysterious and profound, kept her attention fixed on the vulnerable creature before her. The sharp crack of a breaking branch shattered the stillness. Luna's head snapped toward the sound, her body instantly alert. Ethan too heard it, his small form pressing back against the tree trunk as if hoping to disappear into it. The bear emerged from the underbrush 70 yards away, its massive head swinging from side to side as it scented the air. Finding what it sought, it moved with surprising speed toward the terrified boy. Luna's muscles tensed. Everything in her nature told her to flee, to protect herself and her unborn kittens from the much larger predator. Black bears rarely attacked bobcats, but in her pregnant state, she was vulnerable. Yet as the bear drew closer to the frozen child, something remarkable happened within Luna. A decision that defied natural law, that transcended the cold calculus of survival. With a low growl that started deep in her throat, Luna emerged from hiding. Her spotted coat caught the last rays of sunlight as she positioned herself between the advancing bear and the wide-eyed human child. Her ears flattened against her skull, her lips curled back to reveal sharp teeth, and her spine arched to make herself appear larger. The bear halted momentarily, confused by the unexpected confrontation. It rose slightly on its hind legs, towering over the pregnant bobcat that dared to challenge it. The standoff lasted only seconds before the bear dropped back to all fours and charged. What happened next would defy explanation, becoming the stuff of local legend for generations to come. As the massive bear charged toward them, Luna, heavily pregnant and outweighed by hundreds of pounds, did the unthinkable. She leapt forward to meet the attack head-on, a blur of spotted fury placing herself directly between predator and child. Ethan, frozen in terror, could only watch as the forest erupted in snarls and roars, as two of nature's creatures engaged in a battle with him as the unwitting prize. The bobcat, so small compared to her adversary, moved with lightning speed, evading the bear's powerful swipes, while delivering her own attacks with precision. And as the forest darkened around them, as search parties called his name in the distance, no one could have predicted how this extraordinary encounter would end, or how it would challenge everything we thought we knew about the boundaries between wild and tame, between instinct and something that looked remarkably like courage. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Luna faced the charging bear, her much smaller body tensed like a coiled spring. Time slowed for Ethan as he watched through tear-blurred eyes, his young mind unable to fully comprehend the drama unfolding before him. The massive bear, a blur of dark fur and gleaming claws, bore down on them with unstoppable momentum. Luna, however, was lightning in motion. As the bear lunged forward, she darted sideways with extraordinary agility, evading the crushing weight of its paw before launching herself toward its face. Her sharp claws found purchase on the bear's sensitive nose, drawing blood in a roar of pain that echoed through the darkening forest. The bear reared back, momentarily confused by the ferocity of the smaller predator. In that moment of hesitation, Luna dropped back to the ground, placing herself once more between the bear and the trembling boy. Her fur stood on end, making her appear twice her actual size, and the warning growl that emanated from her throat carried a mother's fierce determination. Despite her pregnancy slowing her down, the bobcat moved with calculated precision, as if understanding that retreat was not an option. The bear, shaking its massive head, seemed to reconsider its approach. Blood trickled from the scratches on its muzzle as it assessed this unexpected adversary. After a moment of tense standoff, the bear made another lunge, this time swiping a massive paw that caught Luna's flank, sending her tumbling across the forest floor. Ethan gasped, certain the bobcat had been killed, but Luna was far from defeated. She regained her footing with remarkable speed, her golden eyes blazing with what could only be described as determination. Again, she positioned herself before the boy, her body language communicating an unmistakable message. To reach the child, the bear would have to go through her first. Something in this display, perhaps the sheer audacity of a 30-pound pregnant bobcat challenging a creature 16 times her size, gave the bear pause. It huffed loudly, pawing at the ground in frustration. The easy meal it had anticipated had become unexpectedly complicated. Luna seized the moment, advancing toward the bear with a series of threatening displays, arched back, flashing teeth, and a snarl that belied her size. It was a calculated gamble, one that defied natural instinct. In the wild, smaller predators typically avoided confrontation with larger ones. Yet here was Luna, not just standing her ground, but actively driving the bear back. The bear made one final half-hearted charge that Luna met with another swipe to its already injured nose. This seemed to tip the scales of the bear's internal calculation. The potential meal wasn't worth the continued harassment. With a final huff of frustration, It turned and lumbered back into the forest, occasionally glancing over its shoulder as if unable to comprehend what had just happened. As the sound of the bear's retreat faded into the distance, Luna remained vigilant, her body still positioned protectively before Ethan. Only when she was certain the threat had truly passed did she turn her attention to the boy. Her golden eyes, so fierce moments before, now studied him with what appeared to be concern. Ethan remained frozen against the tree trunk, his young mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. His fear of the bear had been all-consuming, but now a new emotion competed for dominance, awe at the small creature that had saved him. Tentatively, he extended a trembling hand toward the bobcat. "Thank you," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. Luna regarded the outstretched hand cautiously. Under normal circumstances, a wild bobcat would never allow a human this close, but these circumstances were far from normal. After a moment's hesitation, she took a careful step forward, then another, until she was close enough for Ethan to see the rise and fall of her flanks as she caught her breath. The exertion of the fight had clearly taxed her pregnant body. To Ethan's amazement, Luna lowered herself to the ground just a few feet away from him, her watchful gaze alternating between the boy and the surrounding forest. It was as if, having committed to his protection, she had no intention of abandoning him now. A mile away, Jack Harding paused in his tracks, raising a hand to signal the search team behind him to stop. In the distance, he'd heard the unmistakable roar of a bear, a sound that sent ice through his veins given the circumstances. "Did you hear that?" asked Deputy Collins, the sheriff's officer who'd joined Jack's search group. Jack nodded grimly. "Bear. Sounds agitated too." He raised his radio. "All search teams be advised, we have confirmed bear activity in the northeast quadrant. Proceed with extreme caution, and someone get me an update on that Fish and Wildlife Tranquilizer Team's ETA." The radio crackled with acknowledgments as Jack checked his GPS. They were still at least 30 minutes from where he estimated Ethan might be, assuming the boy had continued downhill along the creek bed as lost children often did. But the bear's roar had come from roughly the same direction, and darkness was settling over the forest like a shroud. "We need to pick up the pace," Jack said, adjusting his pack, "but stay tight and keep noise to a minimum. Last thing we need is to aggravate that bear further." As the search team pressed forward with renewed urgency, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Night in these mountains was unforgiving, with temperatures that could plummet to dangerous levels, and now, with a potentially aggressive bear in the mix, the stakes had risen dramatically. Back at the Trailhead command post, Rebecca and David Reynolds huddled together under emergency blankets, their faces hollow with fear and exhaustion. When word came through about the bear, Rebecca buried her face in her husband's shoulder, unable to bear the weight of this new terror. "They're going to find him," David whispered into her hair, his own voice betraying his uncertainty. "Ethan's a smart kid. He knows to stay put if he's lost." Rebecca nodded mutely, but both parents knew the reality. Ethan was just 6 years old, alone in a wilderness that challenged even experienced adults. As night fell, the searchlights illuminated the forest edge, cutting through the darkness like beacons of hope that seemed increasingly fragile. In the gathering darkness, Ethan found himself in a situation that defied everything he'd been taught about wild animals. The bobcat, his protector, remained nearby, her vigilant presence somehow more comforting than frightening. As the temperature dropped, Ethan began to shiver, his light jacket inadequate against the mountain night. Luna noticed the boy's distress. Rising slowly to her feet, she approached him with careful movements, her instincts as a soon-to-be mother seemingly extending to this human child in need. To Ethan's astonishment, she settled beside him, her warm body pressing against his. The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to everything he'd been told about wild animals, that fresh tears sprang to his eyes. But these were tears of gratitude, rather than fear. "Are you going to stay with me?" he whispered, daring to place a small hand on her spotted fur. Luna's only response was to shift slightly closer, her body heat providing welcome warmth against the encroaching cold. In her golden eyes was a wisdom that transcended species, an understanding that sometimes survival meant breaking the established rules. As full darkness enveloped the forest, an unlikely pair huddled together against the base of the ancient pine, a lost human child and a pregnant bobcat, both defying the natural order in ways that would soon become the talk of wildlife biologists and local legend alike. A quarter-mile away, the bear had not given up entirely. Frustrated by its earlier encounter and driven by pre-hibernation hunger, it circled back, approaching from a different direction. This time it moved with greater caution, having learned respect for the fierce small creature that had thwarted its initial attempt. Luna's ears twitched, detecting sounds too faint for Ethan's human hearing. She raised her head, once again alert to danger. The night was young, and their ordeal was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, help was coming, but whether it would arrive in time remained to be seen. The night deepened, wrapping the forest in layers of darkness that even the brightest stars couldn't penetrate. The temperature continued to drop, the cold seeping through Ethan's thin jacket, despite Luna's warming presence. The bobcat remained vigilant, her ears constantly swiveling to track sounds in the darkness, her body tensed at the slightest disturbance. Ethan had never been awake this late before. At home, his bedroom was never truly dark. The glow of his rocket ship nightlight kept the shadows at bay, and his parents' voices were always just down the hall. But here the darkness felt alive, pressing in from all sides. His only comfort was the warm, solid presence of the bobcat beside him. "I wish you could talk," Ethan whispered, his small fingers gently stroking Luna's fur. "I'd ask you your name." The bobcat turned to look at him, her eyes reflecting what little starlight filtered through the canopy above. "I think I'll call you Spots," he decided after a moment's consideration. "Because you have spots, is that okay?" Luna, now christened Spots by the child she protected, blinked slowly, a gesture that Ethan took as approval. What the boy couldn't know was that Luna's unusual behavior had roots in her own past. 3 years earlier, as a half-grown bobcat kit, she had been found injured and starving by a wildlife rehabilitator after a forest fire destroyed her habitat. For 6 months, she had been cared for by humans before being released back into the wild. That brief period of human contact had left an imprint, not enough to make her tame, but enough to reduce her natural fear of human scent. Now, heavy with her first litter and driven by protective instincts that transcended species, Luna had recognized something in Ethan that resonated with her own vulnerability. The approaching birth of her kittens had awakened maternal drives that were powerful enough to override her natural caution. Luna's head suddenly snapped up, her body tensing. Ethan fell silent, instinctively understanding that something had alarmed her. Through the darkness came a sound that made the boy's blood run cold. The shuffling gait of the returning bear, its breathing audible in the night quiet. The bear had not given up. Driven by hunger and irritated by its earlier defeat, it had circled around, approaching now from downwind to mask its scent. Luna rose to her feet, positioning herself once more between Ethan and the unseen threat. Her growl was lower this time, a rumble of warning that seemed to vibrate through the forest floor. Ethan pressed himself against the tree trunk, trying to make himself as small as possible. His heart hammered in his chest and fresh tears threatened to spill. "Please don't let it get me," he whispered. Though whether he was addressing Luna or some higher power, even he wasn't sure. The bear emerged from the darkness like a living shadow, its bulk blocking out the stars. It moved with greater caution this time, having learned respect for the fierce little creature that had bloodied its nose, but hunger and instinct drove it forward nonetheless. Once again, predator faced predator in a standoff that defied nature's hierarchy. Luna, despite her smaller size, showed no sign of backing down. Her body language projected a fierce determination that would have amazed wildlife biologists. A pregnant bobcat deliberately placing herself in harm's way to protect a member of another species. For Luna, in this moment, Ethan had somehow been absorbed into her definition of what needed protecting. The bear rose onto its hind legs, towering over them at nearly 7 feet tall. Its roar shook the night air, an assertion of dominance meant to intimidate. Luna responded not by retreating but by advancing, her own cry a defiant challenge that seemed impossible coming from her small frame. What followed was a dance of feint and counterfeint, of lunge and retreat. The bear, wary now of Luna's slashing claws, tested her defenses while trying to work its way around to the boy. Each time, Luna intercepted it, darting in to deliver painful reminders of her determination before dancing back out of reach. Ethan watched in terrified fascination as the deadly ballet played out before him. Even his 6-year-old mind could grasp the extraordinary nature of what he was witnessing. A small wild animal fighting with everything she had to protect him. A mile away, Jack Harding and his search team heard the bear's roar echo through the night forest. The sound stopped them in their tracks, its direction confirming Jack's worst fears. "That came from the creek drainage," he said, checking his GPS with a flashlight. "Right where we think the boy might be." Deputy Collins unholstered his sidearm. "Standard issue isn't going to do much against a bear that size." "Let's hope we don't have to find out," Jack replied, unhooking the bear spray from his belt. "Fish and Wildlife's tranquilizer team is still 30 minutes out, and that's too long to wait if the bear's found Ethan." He raised his radio again. "All search teams converge on grid coordinates 37 to 42. We've got active bear threat in the vicinity of our primary search area. Move fast but smart." Clicking off the radio, Jack turned to the 4 team members with him. "We're closest. We move in now. Maximum noise. If that bear's found the boy, our best chance is to scare it off." The grim expressions around him reflected the gravity of the situation. They all knew what they might find. Back at command, Rebecca Reynolds sat bolt upright when she heard the radio traffic about the bear. "What are they saying?" she demanded, grabbing the arm of the volunteer coordinator who had been trying to shield the parents from the worst of the news. The coordinator, a kind-faced woman named Helen, hesitated before answering. "They've heard a bear in the area where they think Ethan might be. The teams are converging there now." "Oh God," Rebecca whispered, her face draining of color. Beside her, David pulled her close, his own expression tight with fear. "They're going to find him," Helen assured them, though her voice lacked conviction. "Jack Harding is leading the search himself, and there's nobody who knows these woods better." What none of them could know was that, at that very moment, Ethan's survival hung in the balance of a confrontation that defied every natural law. The bear, growing increasingly frustrated by Luna's defense, made a calculated move. Instead of charging directly, it circled wide, then suddenly changed direction, using a fallen log as a launching point to leap toward Ethan from an unexpected angle. Luna, however, seemed to anticipate the strategy. With a burst of speed that belied her pregnant condition, she intercepted the bear midair, a blur of spotted fur against dark mass. The collision sent both animals tumbling, and for a terrible moment, Luna disappeared beneath the bear's bulk. Ethan cried out, certain his defender had been crushed. But Luna somehow squirmed free, darting away only to immediately circle back. She was favoring her right front leg now, her movement slightly less fluid, but her determination undiminished. The bear shook itself, disoriented by the unexpected mid-air collision. Before it could recover fully, Luna was on the attack again, targeting its face with a series of lightning-quick strikes, that left fresh scratches across its muzzle and dangerously close to its eyes. For the bear, the equation was shifting. What had seemed like an easy meal was becoming increasingly costly. The persistent defense by this fierce small creature, combined with the pain of accumulated injuries, was testing its resolve. Predators in the wild operate on a careful calculus of energy expended versus reward gained. With each passing minute, this potential meal was requiring more effort than it was worth. After one final attempt to circle around Luna, met again with slashing claws and determined fury, the bear seemed to reach a decision. With a huff of frustration that steamed in the cold night air, it turned and lumbered away, disappearing into the darkness from which it had emerged. Luna remained on high alert, her sides heaving with exertion, watching the spot where the bear had vanished. Only when several minutes had passed with no sign of its return did she relax slightly, turning her attention back to Ethan. The boy was shivering now, partly from cold and partly from the aftermath of terror. "You saved me again," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You're hurt." Luna limped back to his side, her injured leg held slightly aloft. Despite her own pain, she once more settled beside him, her warm body offering what comfort it could against the deepening chill. The leg would heal. Survival in the wild had taught her to endure far worse. But for now, her focus remained on the human child, who had somehow become her charge. Somewhere in the vast darkness above, clouds began to gather, obscuring the stars that had provided what little illumination there was. The temperature continued to drop as a weather front moved in, bringing with it the scent of snow. For Ethan, who had stopped shivering and now felt oddly warm despite the cold, a dangerous sign of hypothermia beginning to set in, the night had become a blur of fear, wonder, and increasing drowsiness. "My teacher said we're not supposed to name wild animals," Ethan murmured, his words slightly slurred as he leaned against Luna's warm body. "She says it makes us forget they're wild. But you're not like other wild animals, are you, Spots?" Luna's golden eyes regarded him steadily, her injured leg tucked beneath her body as she maintained her protective vigil. The painful throbbing in her paw was a constant reminder of the risk she had taken, a risk that defied explanation by conventional wildlife behavior standards. Yet here she remained, her powerful maternal instincts somehow extended to encompass this human child. What Ethan couldn't know, what even wildlife experts could only speculate about later, was that Luna's unusual behavior had roots not just in her previous human contact, but in a rare capacity for empathy, sometimes observed in certain higher mammals. In her condition, heavy with kittens and driven by hormones that heightened protective instincts, Luna had recognized vulnerability that transcended species boundaries. A soft rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, and the first fat drops of cold rain began to fall through the forest canopy. Ethan looked up, blinking as a raindrop hit his cheek. "I don't like storms," he whispered, huddling closer to Luna. The bobcat tensed briefly at his movement before relaxing again, allowing the contact that would have been unthinkable just hours earlier. The coming rain presented a new threat. Wet clothing and cold temperatures could accelerate hypothermia, and the ancient pine they sheltered under provided only minimal protection from the elements. Luna seemed to sense this new danger. After a moment's consideration, she rose stiffly to her feet, nudging Ethan with her head. "What is it?" the boy asked, his mind foggy with cold and exhaustion. Luna took a few steps away, then looked back expectantly. When Ethan didn't move, she returned and nudged him again, more insistently this time. "You want me to follow you?" he asked, struggling to his feet. The bobcat limped ahead a short distance, constantly looking back to ensure the boy was following. Her injured leg slowed her pace, which was fortunate, as Ethan's own movements were becoming increasingly uncoordinated. Luna led him along a barely perceptible game trail, away from the exposed ridge and deeper into the forest where the canopy was thicker. After about 50 yards, they came to a massive fallen oak. Years of decay had hollowed out much of its trunk, creating a natural shelter. Luna disappeared inside, then peered out at Ethan, clearly expecting him to follow. The boy hesitated only briefly before crawling into the hollow log. Inside, it was significantly warmer and, most importantly, dry. The accumulated debris of years, leaves, twigs, and forest detritus had created a natural insulation. For Ethan, it felt almost like a secret fort, the kind he and his friends sometimes built in the backyard. "This is like a house," he said with tired wonder as Luna settled beside him once more. "Is this where you live?" In fact, the hollow log was not Luna's den. Her actual birthing den was nearly a mile away, carefully selected and prepared for the arrival of her kittens. This was simply a shelter she knew from her territory patrols, one of many mental maps she maintained of resources throughout her range. Her decision to bring Ethan here showed a level of problem-solving that would later astound wildlife biologists who studied the case. Inside the log, protected from the increasingly heavy rainfall, Ethan's shivering gradually subsided. The dangerous warmth he had felt earlier gave way to normal sensation returning to his extremities. Luna's body heat, combined with the natural insulation of their shelter, was enough to stabilize his condition, at least temporarily. "My mom and dad must be really worried," Ethan said softly, his thoughts turning to his parents for the first time in hours. The immediate danger had consumed all his attention, but now, in this moment of relative safety, he felt a wave of homesickness wash over him. "They're probably looking for me right now." As if in confirmation, a distant sound carried through the forest, human voices calling his name, still far away, but definitely there. Ethan perked up, listening intently. "They're looking for me," he exclaimed, starting to crawl toward the log's entrance. "I need to—" Luna moved with surprising speed, blocking his exit. Outside, the storm was intensifying with driving rain and gusting winds that would quickly soak the boy to the skin. The Bobcat's instincts told her the shelter was safer for now, a calculation that balanced immediate comfort against the possibility of eventual rescue. Ethan, trusting the animal that had already saved his life twice, settled back. "Okay, I'll stay," he said, as if Luna could understand his words. "But when the rain stops, we need to find them." Half a mile away, Jack Harding and his search team battled against the worsening conditions. The sudden storm had caught them by surprise, reducing visibility to near zero and making progress through the forest treacherous. "We need to find shelter and wait this out," Deputy Collins shouted over the wind. "We can't help the boy if we all get hypothermia." Jack's face was grim beneath his rain-slicked hood. "5 more minutes," he insisted. "There's a stand of hemlocks ahead that might provide some cover. If we haven't found anything by then, we'll reassess." The truth Jack wouldn't voice was that every minute Ethan spent exposed to these conditions drastically reduced his chances of survival. The thought of stopping the search, even temporarily, felt like abandonment. Through sheets of rain, Jack's powerful flashlight illuminated the forest ahead, methodically sweeping from side to side. Water streamed down his face as he scanned for any sign, a scrap of clothing, a footprint, anything that might indicate Ethan had passed this way. "Over there," one of the volunteers suddenly called out, pointing to something red caught on a branch. Jack rushed forward, his heart pounding. Caught on a thorny bush was a small piece of red fabric, the same color as the jacket Ethan had been wearing according to his parents' description. Jack carefully removed it, examining the torn edges. "This is fresh," he announced, a spark of hope igniting despite the miserable conditions. "He came this way, and not long ago." The team's energy was instantly renewed, their focus sharpened by this tangible evidence. What they couldn't know was that the fabric had been torn from Ethan's jacket during his initial panicked flight hours earlier, long before Luna had led him to the hollow log where they now sheltered. The search team pressed on, following what they believed to be Ethan's trail, moving steadily away from where the boy actually was. The storm's intensity worked against them, washing away scents that search dogs might have followed, obliterating subtle signs that even Jack's experienced eyes might have detected in better conditions. Back at the command post, now hastily relocated to the ranger station due to the storm, Rebecca and David Reynolds huddled together, listening to the crackle of radio updates with increasing desperation. They found a piece of his jacket, the coordinator told them, trying to sound encouraging. They're following his trail now. But this storm... Rebecca couldn't finish the sentence, her mind filled with images of her small son alone in the tempest. David squeezed her hand. Ethan's smart. He knows to find shelter. Neither parent voiced the thought that dominated their minds, that even the smartest 6-year-old would struggle to survive a night like this alone in the wilderness. In the hollow log, Ethan had finally succumbed to exhaustion, his small body curled against Luna's warm flank. The Bobcat remained awake, her golden eyes reflecting the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated their shelter. Her injured leg throbbed, but the rest had begun to ease the worst of the pain. Outside, the storm raged on, water cascading off the log's curved surface. Luna's ears suddenly pricked forward, detecting a sound different from the storm's chaos. Her body tensed, causing Ethan to stir slightly in his sleep. Something was approaching their shelter, something large, moving with purpose despite the weather. Luna's muscles coiled beneath her spotted coat, ready to defend their shelter despite her injury. The approaching presence was heavy-footed and determined, pushing through the underbrush with little attempt at stealth. Ethan stirred in his sleep, unconsciously responding to Luna's tension even before fully waking. "What's wrong?" he murmured, rubbing his eyes as he became aware of the Bobcat's alert posture. A flash of lightning illuminated the forest outside their hollow log, and in that brief, brilliant moment, Luna saw what approached. Not the bear returning, but a massive bull elk, its antlers spreading like gnarled branches against the stormy sky. The creature was seeking shelter from the deluge, drawn to the same fallen oak that housed Ethan and Luna. Luna relaxed slightly, though she remained watchful. An elk posed no immediate threat to them, particularly one more concerned with the storm than with the log's current occupants. Still, the Bobcat positioned herself at the entrance, her body language communicating clear ownership of the space. The elk paused, seeming to notice them for the first time. Its nostrils flared as it caught their scent, predator and human, an unusual combination. For a tense moment, the massive herbivore considered its options, rain streaming down its dark coat. Then, with a snort of resignation, it moved on, disappearing into the storm in search of alternative cover. "Was it the bear again?" Ethan asked, now fully awake and peering anxiously past Luna toward the entrance. The Bobcat turned back to him, her golden eyes reflecting the next lightning flash. She limped back to his side, settling once more against him with what seemed like reassurance. Her injured paw was swollen now, the price of her earlier battle. "You're really hurt," Ethan observed, his small face creased with concern. "My dad says animals are tougher than people. He says they don't complain when they get hurt." Luna's only response was to rest her head on her uninjured paw, her sides rising and falling with steady breaths. What Ethan couldn't know was that Luna was experiencing the early stages of labor, her body beginning the process that would bring her kittens into the world. The stress of the confrontation with the bear had accelerated her natural timeline, triggering contractions that were still mild but would intensify in the hours to come. The storm continued its assault on the forest, wind driving rain in sideways sheets that battered the trees and turned the forest floor into a network of rivulets. Inside their shelter, Ethan and Luna remained relatively dry, though occasional drips found their way through the log's weathered wood. Half a mile away, Jack Harding and his search team had been forced to take shelter beneath a dense stand of hemlock trees, their branches providing minimal protection from the worst of the storm. "This is impossible," Deputy Collins said, his voice raised to be heard over the wind. "We can't see more than 10 feet in front of us." Jack knew he was right, though admitting it felt like failure. "We'll hold position until the worst passes," he conceded, raising his radio to update the command post. "Search Team Alpha to base. We're taking shelter at coordinates 3744. Visibility 0. Conditions unsafe to proceed. We'll resume search as soon as weather permits." The radio crackled with static before a response came through. "Copy that, Alpha. All teams are reporting similar conditions. Weather Service indicates the front should move through in approximately 2 hours." 2 hours. Jack's jaw tightened as he thought of Ethan somewhere out in this maelstrom. The piece of jacket they'd found had renewed his hope, but reality was setting in. A 6-year-old boy, alone in these conditions, faced almost insurmountable odds. What none of them knew was that Ethan was not alone, and that the hollow log Luna had led him to provided better shelter than anything the search teams had found for themselves. Back at the ranger station, Rebecca Reynolds paced the small conference room that had become their waiting area, unable to sit still despite her exhaustion. "They've stopped searching," she said, her voice hollow as she turned to her husband. "They've stopped looking for our son." David rose from his chair to embrace her. "Just temporarily," he said, though his own face reflected the same fear. "They can't help him if they can't see as soon as the storm lets up." "It might be too late by then," Rebecca interrupted, giving voice to the terror that had been building since Ethan first disappeared. "He's just a little boy, David. He's all alone out there." The coordinator, who had been giving them space, approached gently. "Mrs. Reynolds, Mr. Reynolds, I know this is incredibly difficult, but I want you to know something. Children are often more resilient than we give them credit for, and Ethan is wearing that bright red jacket. As soon as there's enough light to see, that's going to make him much easier to spot." Rebecca nodded mechanically, clinging to any shred of hope. What she couldn't know was that at that very moment her son was safer than anyone had reason to believe possible, protected by one of nature's most unlikely guardians. In the hollow log, Ethan had drifted back to sleep, his body curled instinctively toward Luna's warmth. The Bobcat, however, remained awake, her body occasionally tensing with the mild contractions that were coming with increasing frequency. Her instincts urged her to return to her birthing den, carefully prepared weeks earlier. But stronger still was the protective drive that kept her beside the sleeping human child. Luna's ear twitched as she caught a sound different from the storm's chaos, the distant, faint call of human voices. The search teams were out there, though too far away and too obscured by the storm to be effective. She filed this information away, understanding on some level that these humans were looking for her young charge. As the night deepened, the storm's fury began to ebb. The torrential downpour gradually eased to a steady rain, and the wind that had howled through the forest canopy diminished to occasional gusts. Through gaps in the clouds, a faint silver glow indicated the moon was rising, though still hidden from direct view. Inside the log, Ethan stirred again, this time roused by a subtle change in Luna's breathing. The Bobcat was experiencing a stronger contraction, her sides rippling visibly with the effort. The boy sat up, immediately concerned. "Are you okay, Spots?" he asked, his small hand hovering uncertainly over her flank. Luna's golden eyes met his, somehow communicating a calmness despite her discomfort. When the contraction passed, she shifted position slightly, adjusting to find more comfort on the bed of leaves and forest debris. Ethan, with a child's intuitive understanding, seemed to grasp that something significant was happening. "Are you going to have babies?" he whispered, his eyes wide in the darkness. "My mom showed me videos of when our cat had kittens. Is that what's happening?" The bobcat simply blinked slowly, the feline equivalent of trust and affection. What she couldn't communicate was the conflict she now faced, the instinctual drive to seek her prepared birthing den versus the protective bond that had formed with this human child. Nature had programmed her to isolate before delivery, yet here she remained. As the rain continued to lessen outside, Luna made a decision. Rising stiffly to her feet, she moved to the entrance of the log and looked back at Ethan expectantly. "You want to go outside?" he asked, confused by this change. "But it's still raining." Luna's patience was evident as she waited, occasionally glancing outside as if calculating something. When Ethan finally crawled toward her, she led him out into the damp forest. The rain had indeed diminished to a light drizzle, and breaks in the cloud cover allowed intermittent moonlight to filter through the canopy, casting silver-blue patterns on the forest floor. With her injured leg still causing her to limp, Luna set a deliberate pace, frequently looking back to ensure Ethan followed. The boy, trusting her completely now, stayed close behind. "Where are we going?" he asked, his sneakers squelching in the saturated ground. Luna's path through the forest seemed deliberate, guided by some internal map that Ethan couldn't comprehend. Despite her injured leg and the occasional pause when a contraction gripped her, the bobcat moved with purpose, leading the boy along game trails invisible to human eyes. Moonlight broke through the thinning clouds in silver shafts, illuminating their way in ghostly patches that appeared and disappeared as they traveled. The forest had transformed after the storm, taking on an almost magical quality. Water droplets clung to every surface, catching the moonlight like thousands of tiny stars. Nocturnal creatures, emerging after the rain, created a symphony of sounds. The distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of small mammals in the underbrush, the drip, drip, drip of water falling from leaves. For Ethan, exhaustion had given way to a dreamlike state where following a wild bobcat through a midnight forest seemed perfectly natural. His clothes were damp and his sneakers sodden, but the movement kept him warm enough to stave off the worst effects of the cold. More importantly, the complete trust he'd developed in Luna, in spots, overrode any fear he might otherwise have felt. "Are we going to find my mom and dad?" he asked, his voice small against the vastness of the forest. Luna paused at the question, turning to look at him with those inscrutable golden eyes. After a moment, she continued forward, her pace slightly quickened despite her limp. What Ethan couldn't know was that Luna was leading him not toward human rescuers, but toward her birthing den. Her instincts, now working on multiple levels, had created a new calculus. The boy would be safer in her den, dry and warm, while she delivered her kittens. The den itself was a masterpiece of natural engineering, tucked beneath the massive root system of an ancient spruce that had partially toppled decades ago, creating a cavity reinforced by rock and earth. Luna had spent weeks preparing it, dragging in soft materials for bedding and ensuring it had proper drainage. The entrance was deliberately small and hidden by a thicket of berry bushes, large enough for her to pass through comfortably, but a tight squeeze for anything larger. As they approached this sanctuary, Luna's contractions intensified. She paused more frequently now, her sides visibly rippling with each wave. Ethan, noticing her distress, slowed his pace to match hers. "You really don't feel good," he observed with a child's simple directness. "My mom says when something hurts, you should rest." Luna pushed on despite the discomfort, her maternal instincts now operating on dual tracks, protection for her unborn kittens and for this human child who had somehow become her responsibility. The last 100 yards to her den were the most challenging, each step requiring deliberate effort as her body prepared for birth. Finally, they reached the thicket that concealed her den. Luna pushed through the dense vegetation, creating a path that Ethan could follow. The boy hesitated only briefly before dropping to his hands and knees to crawl after her. "Wow," he breathed as he emerged into the den. Even in the dim light filtering through the entrance, he could see that this was no random hollow but a carefully prepared space. The ground was lined with dried grasses, shredded bark, and what appeared to be tufts of rabbit fur, all combining to create a soft, insulating layer that was blessedly dry after the soaking storm. Luna circled 3 times before settling onto her prepared nest, her breathing more labored now. Ethan, sensing her need for space, curled up in a corner of the den where the root structure created a natural alcove. "Is this your house?" he asked, running his hand over the soft bedding. "It's nice, better than that log." The bobcat's only response was to lay her head down, conserving energy for the birth that was approaching. The den's superior insulation, combined with its smaller space, created a warmth that began to penetrate Ethan's damp clothes. For the first time in hours, he felt truly comfortable, the stress and fear of the night receding as drowsiness overtook him once more. "I'm really tired, Spots," he murmured, his eyelids growing heavy. "Is it okay if I go to sleep?" As if in answer, Luna began to purr, a sound rarely heard from bobcats in the wild, but one that seemed to fill the small den with reassurance. Ethan's eyes drifted closed, the purring becoming the soundtrack to his descent into exhausted slumber. Miles away, as the storm finally broke and moonlight spilled across the sodden forest, Jack Harding gave the order to resume the search. His team, cold and stiff but determined, spread out in a standard grid pattern, their flashlights creating beams of light that cut through the remaining mist. "The rain will have washed away most tracks," Jack warned them. "So we're looking for any sign, broken branches, disturbed ground, anything that might indicate someone passed through." They moved methodically, calling Ethan's name at regular intervals, their voices carrying further in the cleared air. The piece of red fabric they'd found earlier remained their best lead, though Jack worried it might have led them in the wrong direction. 6 hours had passed since Ethan was reported missing, 6 hours in which a scared child could have traveled miles or hidden himself so effectively that even experienced searchers might miss him. "Jack, over here." The call came from Deputy Collins, who was examining something at the base of a large pine tree. Jack hurried over, hope surging. "What have you got?" Collins pointed to a depression in the ground, partially protected from the rain by the tree's sprawling branches. "Someone sat here, someone small, and look, candy wrapper." Jack crouched to examine the evidence. The wrapper was from a chocolate bar, the same brand that had been in Ethan's backpack according to his parents, and the depression did appear to be the right size for a small child. "Good eye," Jack said, clapping Collins on the shoulder. "This is our first solid sign." He studied the surrounding area, his flashlight beam probing the darkness. Question is, where did he go from here? What neither man noticed in the darkness beyond their flashlight beams were the faint bobcat tracks leading away from the tree, tracks that, had they seen them, might have seemed completely unrelated to their search for a missing child. Back at the ranger station, Rebecca and David Reynolds sat beside a radio, listening to the search team's communications with increasing desperation. Each update brought a momentary surge of hope, quickly dashed when no definitive news of Ethan followed. "They found a candy wrapper," Rebecca said, seizing on this latest development. "That has to be from his backpack. I packed his favorite chocolate bar." David nodded, squeezing her hand. "They're getting closer." "But it's been so long," she whispered, voicing the fear that grew with each passing hour. "And that storm, He must be so cold and scared. What neither parent could have imagined was that their son was currently curled up in the warmest, driest spot for miles around, sleeping peacefully under the protection of a wild predator that had defied every natural instinct to keep him safe. In Luna's den, the birthing process had begun in earnest. The first kit, a tiny blind creature no larger than a hamster, had arrived, and Luna was now meticulously cleaning it, her rough tongue stimulating its circulation and breathing. The small mewling sounds it made were barely audible, yet somehow they penetrated Ethan's deep sleep, causing him to stir. The boy blinked awake, momentarily disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness. As his eyes adjusted, he made out Luna's form and the tiny creature now nursing at her side. Understanding dawned slowly. "You had a baby," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "A kitten?" Luna acknowledged him with a glance before returning her attention to her newborn. Her labor wasn't finished. More contractions indicated at least one more kit was on the way. Despite the intensity of the birthing process, she remained aware of Ethan's presence, her protective instincts encompassing both her biological offspring and her adopted human charge. Dawn was still hours away as Ethan watched, transfixed, while Luna's second kitten emerged into the world. The tiny creature, even smaller than the first, squirmed blindly until Luna's gentle tongue guided it toward her warmth. The bobcat's sides still rippled with contractions, indicating her labor wasn't yet complete. "There's another one coming," Ethan whispered, his exhaustion forgotten in the wonder of witnessing this miracle of life. Though only 6 years old, he understood he was seeing something few humans ever would: wild bobcats giving birth in their natural den. Luna's golden eyes occasionally flicked toward him, checking his position before returning to the vital task at hand. Her third kit arrived moments later, this one larger than its siblings with markings that were visible even in the dim light filtering into the den. A final contraction delivered the afterbirth, which Luna quickly consumed, an instinctual behavior that would leave no scent to attract predators. The 3 newborn kittens, each no larger than a potato, mewled softly as they nestled against their mother's warm belly. Their eyes were sealed shut, their ears folded, their tiny paws kneading instinctively as they nursed. Luna curled around them protectively, her purr rumbling through the small space. "They're so tiny," Ethan observed, his voice hushed with awe. "Were all cats that small when they were born?" Luna's only response was to continue purring, her exhausted body finally relaxing after the intense labor. Despite her fatigue, she remained alert, her senses monitoring both her vulnerable newborns and the world outside their shelter. Ethan settled back in his corner of the den, watching the small family with a child's unfiltered fascination. The events of the past 12 hours, getting lost, facing the bear, finding shelter during the storm, and now witnessing birth, had created an experience beyond anything in his young life. Fear had given way to wonder, and in Luna, he had found an unlikely guardian that defied everything he'd been taught about wild animals. "My teacher says wild animals can't be friends with people," he said softly. "But she's wrong about you, isn't she, Spots?" Outside the den, the forest was coming alive with pre-dawn activity. Nocturnal creatures returning to their daytime hiding places crossed paths with early risers just beginning their day. Among them, moving with silent purpose, was the bear that had twice been thwarted in its attempt to make Ethan its prey. The storm had washed away most scents, but not all. The bear's sensitive nose could still detect traces of the bobcat and the human child, though the trail was faint and fragmented. Driven by hunger and a predator's stubborn memory, it quartered the area methodically, working its way closer to Luna's hidden den. 2 miles away, Jack Harding's search team had expanded their efforts following the discovery of the candy wrapper. The thinning cloud cover allowed moonlight to illuminate the forest, making their work marginally easier as they spread out in a standard search pattern. "I don't understand it," Jack said to Deputy Collins as they paused to check their GPS coordinates. The boy sat there, had a snack, and then where? It's like he vanished. Collins swept his flashlight across the forest floor, its beam revealing nothing but wet leaves and broken branches from the storm. Could he have been picked up? Maybe someone else found him? Jack shook his head. All access roads are being monitored. If someone had found him and brought him out, we'd know by now. He didn't voice his darker thoughts, that Ethan might have succumbed to the elements, that the storm might have washed away all traces of what happened to him. "Sir," one of the volunteers called from 20 yards away, "I think I found something." Jack and Collins hurried over to where the volunteers stood beside a massive fallen oak. The woman pointed to the hollow interior of the log. "Look at this. The inside is dry and these leaves are disturbed. Someone's been in here recently." Jack crouched to examine the evidence, his experienced eyes noting the compressed leaves and what appeared to be a small footprint preserved in the softer material. "Good catch," he said, hope rekindling. "This could be where he waited out the storm." "But there's something else," the volunteer said, her flashlight illuminating the ground just outside the log. "These aren't human tracks." Jack studied the partial prints visible in a patch of mud protected from the worst of the rain by the log's overhang. His breath caught as he recognized the distinctive shape. "Bobcat," he said, his voice tight. Adult Bobcat was here. The implications settled over the search team like a cold shadow. A predator, a defenseless child, the conclusion seemed inescapable. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Jack cautioned, seeing the expressions around him. "Bobcats rarely attack humans, especially one Ethan's size. It's more likely they both use this shelter independently." But as he spoke, Jack was already radioing the other teams, updating them on this worrying development. "All units be advised, we have evidence of Bobcat activity in the vicinity of the boy's last known position. Proceed with caution." Back at command, Rebecca Reynolds overheard this transmission as it came through on the base radio. Her face drained of color as she turned to her husband. "A bobcat," she whispered, her worst fears finding new fuel. "They think a bobcat might have—" David pulled her close, his own expression grim. "We don't know anything for certain," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Jack said they rarely attack humans." "But Ethan is so small," Rebecca said, tears welling in her eyes. "He wouldn't have had any way to defend himself." The coordinator, who had been giving them space, approached with fresh coffee. "Try not to assume the worst," she advised gently. "Wild animals typically avoid humans unless they're threatened, and the fact that they found where Ethan sheltered during the storm is actually good news. It means he was thinking clearly, seeking protection from the elements." Rebecca nodded mechanically, clinging to this slender thread of hope, while her mind raced with terrible possibilities. As dawn approached, bringing the search's 12th hour, the primal fear of every parent, the inability to protect their child, had become her waking nightmare. Inside Luna's den, Ethan had drifted back to sleep, lulled by warmth and the soft sounds of the nursing kittens. His dreams were a confused jumble of bears and bobcats, of storm-lashed forests and worried parents calling his name. Occasionally he would stir, momentarily disoriented, before the sight of Luna and her newborns would ground him back in his extraordinary reality. Luna herself dozed fitfully, her body recovering from the exertion of birth while her senses remained partially alert. The first 12 hours of a bobcat's life were its most vulnerable, and her protective instincts were at their peak. Yet these same instincts now extended to Ethan, creating a maternal vigilance that encompassed both species. The bear's approach was slow but deliberate, its nose testing the air currents for the scents it sought. Having lost the trail several times, it would pause, circle, and try again, gradually working its way closer to the hidden den. Predators of its size rarely gave up once they had committed to a hunt. Persistence was as much a survival trait as strength or speed. 100 yards from the den, the bear found what it had been seeking, a fresh scent trail where Luna and Ethan had traveled after the storm. Unlike the washed-out traces elsewhere in the forest, this trail was clear and recent. The bear's pace quickened, its hunger and determination renewed. Luna's ears twitched in her half-sleep, detecting sounds too faint for human hearing. The subtle displacement of underbrush, the careful placement of heavy paws trying to move quietly. Her eyes snapped open, instantly alert. Beside her, her newborn kittens continued to nurse, oblivious to potential danger. In his corner, Ethan slept on, his small chest rising and falling with each breath. The bobcat rose cautiously, her movements hampered by her still tender body and injured leg. She moved to the den entrance, her keen senses probing the pre-dawn darkness. What she detected confirmed her worst fears. The bear had found them. Luna's dilemma was immediate and profound. Her newborn kittens could not be moved. They were too vulnerable, too dependent on her warmth and milk. Yet the approaching bear threatened everything. Her instinct to protect her biological offspring warred with the bond she had formed with Ethan, creating a conflict no wild animal should ever have to resolve. Nature has no protocol for the choice Luna faced in that moment. No evolutionary programming to guide a mother's decision when her biological offspring and an adopted charge from another species are simultaneously threatened. For a heartbeat, she remained frozen in indecision, her instincts pulling her in opposite directions. The bear was now 50 yards away, moving with increasing confidence as the scent trail grew stronger. Soon it would discover the carefully concealed entrance to the den, and when it did, the thin barrier of vegetation would offer no protection. Luna made her decision. Moving back to her kittens, she began to groom them vigorously, stimulating their circulation and preparing them for what was to come. Then she turned to Ethan, nudging him awake with urgent persistence. The boy blinked drowsily, momentarily confused by his surroundings. "Spots? What's wrong?" Luna nudged him again, more forcefully this time, pushing him toward the deepest part of the den where the root structure created a natural barrier. Understanding dawned slowly on Ethan's face as he recognized the bobcat's urgency. "Is something coming?" he whispered, suddenly alert. As if in answer, a low huffing sound came from outside, much closer now, the bear testing the air, knowing its quarry was near. Luna positioned herself between the den entrance and both Ethan and her kittens, her injured leg trembling slightly with the strain of supporting her weight. "It's the bear, isn't it?" Ethan's voice quavered with renewed fear. "It found us." Luna's only response was to flatten her ears against her skull, her body lowering into a defensive posture. What happened next would become the most controversial and studied aspect of the entire extraordinary encounter, a moment that would challenge conventional understanding of animal behavior for years to come. The bobcat, rather than remaining with her vulnerable newborns as every natural instinct would dictate, moved deliberately to Ethan. With gentle but insistent pressure, she herded him deeper into the den's recesses, where the twisted roots created a space just large enough for the boy to wedge himself into. A space too small for the bear to reach, even if it broke through the den's outer defenses. "What about your babies?" Ethan asked, resisting slightly as he glanced toward the 3 tiny kittens. Luna persisted, using her head to push him into the protective nook. Only when Ethan was secured in this natural fortress did she return to her kittens. Working quickly, she gathered them one by one in her mouth, moving them to a depression in the ground directly beneath where Ethan was positioned. The bear was at the den entrance now, its massive form blocking what little pre-dawn light filtered through. Its claws raked at the vegetation concealing the opening, tearing away the protective barrier with frightening efficiency. Luna, having positioned her kittens in the safest possible location, now faced the ultimate test of her extraordinary protective instincts. Instead of retreating to guard her kittens directly, Luna charged toward the entrance, launching herself at the bear's face the moment it pushed its head into the den. The attack was sudden and ferocious, a blur of claws and teeth targeting the bear's sensitive nose and eyes. The confined space of the entrance actually worked to Luna's advantage, preventing the bear from bringing its superior size to bear effectively. From his protected position, Ethan could only hear the terrible sounds of the confrontation, snarls, roars, and the thud of bodies colliding in desperate combat. He curled tighter into his nook, hands pressed over his ears, eyes squeezed shut as tears streamed down his face. Beneath him, unbeknownst to the terrified boy, Luna's kittens mewled in blind distress, sensing their mother's absence and the chaos around them. Outside the den, the eastern sky had begun to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Jack Harding's team, having worked through the night without rest, had methodically expanded their search from the hollow log, where they'd found evidence of both Ethan and the Bobcat. "The tracks lead this way," Jack said, crouching to examine faint impressions in the forest floor that had survived the storm. "The boy and the Bobcat, they're moving together." Deputy Collins frowned, unable to make sense of this. "Together? That can't be right." "I'm just telling you what the sign shows," Jack replied, rising stiffly to his feet. "And these were made after the rain, which means they're fresh." The search team moved forward with renewed purpose, following the intermittent trail left by Luna and Ethan. The first rays of sunlight penetrated the forest canopy, casting long shadows and illuminating details that had been invisible in the darkness. "Wait!" Jack suddenly raised his hand, halting the team. "Listen." In the distance, barely audible over the morning forest sounds, came a roar that raised the hair on the back of every searcher's neck. The bear's challenge echoed through the trees, followed by sounds of conflict too distant to identify clearly. "That's a bear," Collins said unnecessarily, his hand moving to his sidearm, "and it sounds like it's fighting something." Jack's face was grim as he radioed the other search teams. "All units converge on our position. We have bear activity approximately half a mile northeast of our location. Approach with extreme caution." Inside the den, the battle between Luna and the bear had reached its desperate climax. The Bobcat, despite her smaller size and post-birth weakness, fought with a ferocity that defied explanation. Each time the bear attempted to force its way further into the den, Luna counterattacked, targeting its face with precision strikes that drove it temporarily back. But such uneven combat could have only one outcome. Luna was tiring rapidly, her injured leg barely supporting her weight, while the bear's rage and hunger only grew with each painful attack. In a final, desperate lunge, the Bobcat launched herself directly at the bear's throat, a killing strike that might have worked against a smaller adversary. The bear, however, caught her with a sweeping paw, sending Luna crashing against the den wall with bone-jarring force. The Bobcat crumpled to the ground, momentarily stunned as the bear pushed its massive head and shoulders further into the den, its small eyes gleaming with triumph as it surveyed the interior. Ethan, peering through his fingers at the terrible scene, saw Luna struggling to rise, saw the bear advancing toward both him and the helpless kittens. In that moment, something remarkable happened, a transformation that psychologists would later struggle to explain. Fear gave way to a protective rage that surged through the 6-year-old's small body. His teacher had once told the class that making yourself big and making loud noises could scare away predators. With no thought for his own safety, Ethan unfolded from his protective nook and stood as tall as the den ceiling would allow. "Go away," he screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice cracking with the effort. "Leave us alone." The bear hesitated, momentarily startled by this unexpected development. In that instant of confusion, Luna regained her footing. Though clearly injured, The bobcat positioned herself once more between the bear and both Ethan and her kittens, her golden eyes blazing with a final, desperate determination. The standoff lasted only seconds, but in that brief moment, the balance shifted yet again. From outside the den came new sounds, human voices, shouts of alarm and warning, the crash of bodies moving rapidly through undergrowth. The bear's head swiveled toward this new threat, its predatory calculations instantly recalibrated. Jack Harding burst into the small clearing just in time to see the bear extracting itself from what appeared to be a hole beneath a massive root system. Without hesitation, he raised his bear spray, unleashing a cloud of capsaicin that caught the creature full in the face. The bear recoiled with a roar of pain, paws swiping at its burning eyes and nose. Deputy Collins and two other searchers emerged from the trees, adding their own shouts and threatening gestures to the confusion. Faced with multiple human attackers and blinded by the spray, the bear made its choice. With a final roar of frustration, it turned and crashed away through the underbrush. Jack rushed toward the opening the bear had been investigating, his heart pounding with a terrible suspicion. "Ethan," he called, dropping to his knees before the partially destroyed entrance. "Ethan Reynolds, are you in there?" For a moment that stretched like eternity, silence answered Jack's call. Then faintly from within the damaged den came a child's voice. "Hello? Is somebody there?" "Ethan." Jack's relief was palpable as he turned to his team. "He's alive, he's in there." To the boy, he called, "Ethan, I'm Ranger Jack Harding. We've been looking for you all night. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," came the muffled reply, "but Spots is hurt. The bear hurt her." Jack exchanged confused glances with Deputy Collins. "Spots?" he called back. "Who's Spots?" "The Bobcat," Ethan answered, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "She saved me from the bear twice, and she had babies last night. I watched them being born." The search team members looked at each other in stunned disbelief. Jack recovered first, his training taking over as he assessed the situation. "Ethan, I need you to come out very carefully," he instructed, keeping his voice calm despite his concern about a potentially injured wild predator in the confined space with the boy. "Can you crawl toward my voice?" There was a pause before Ethan replied, "I don't want to leave Spots. She's really hurt." Jack took a deep breath, considering his options. The den entrance was damaged, but still too small for an adult to enter. If Ethan wouldn't come out voluntarily, and if there was indeed an injured bobcat inside, the situation was considerably more complex than a simple rescue. "Ethan, listen to me," Jack tried again. "Your mom and dad are really worried about you. They've been waiting all night to see you. Don't you want to go see them?" Another pause. "Can Spots and her babies come too?" Jack looked helplessly at his team. How could he explain the impossibility of what the boy was asking? Before he could formulate a response, Collins stepped forward. "Let me try," the deputy said quietly. Kneeling beside the entrance, he spoke gently. "Ethan, my name is Michael. I understand you want to help your friend. That's really brave and kind of you. But right now, we need to get you out first, and then we can figure out how to help Spots, okay?" This approach seemed to resonate with Ethan. After a moment of consideration, his small voice came back. "Promise you'll help her? She saved my life." "I promise we'll do everything we can," Collins replied with complete sincerity. Inside the den, Ethan faced his own difficult moment of decision. Luna lay curled around her kittens, her breathing labored, blood matting the fur on her flank where the bear's claws had caught her. Her golden eyes, which had shown such fierce determination moments before, now watched him with what seemed like resignation, as if she understood that their extraordinary time together had reached its end. "I have to go with them," Ethan whispered to the bobcat, crawling closer to stroke her head one last time. "But they're going to help you. I made them promise." Luna's only response was a slow blink. that same gesture of feline trust she had shown him throughout their time together. Ethan's throat tightened with emotion too complex for his young mind to fully comprehend. Gratitude, concern, and a strange sense of loss already settling in at the thought of leaving his wild protector. With one final look at Luna and her kittens, Ethan turned and began crawling toward the damaged entrance. Sunlight streamed through the opening, illuminating his path as he emerged, blinking, into a world that seemed somehow changed since he had last seen it. "Ethan!" Jack reached forward to help the boy the final few feet, lifting him clear of the demolished entrance. "Thank God you're all right." The search team gathered around, their expressions a mixture of relief, amazement, and curiosity as they took in the boy's disheveled appearance. Despite his ordeal, being lost, confronting a bear, spending the night in a bobcat's den, Ethan appeared remarkably unharmed. His clothes were dirty and damp, his face smudged with dirt, but there were no visible injuries. "Where's Spots?" were his first words as Jack set him on his feet. "You promised to help her." Jack knelt to the boy's level, examining him quickly for signs of shock or hypothermia. "Ethan, you keep talking about a bobcat. Are you saying a bobcat helped you?" Ethan nodded emphatically. "Her name is Spots. She fought the bear when it tried to eat me. Then she showed me where to hide during the storm, and then she took me to her special den and had her babies, 3 tiny kittens." His small face grew solemn. "But the bear came back and Spots got really hurt protecting me and her babies." The adults exchanged glances that communicated their shared skepticism. A child's imagination, they assumed, had transformed a frightening ordeal into something his mind could better process. "He's been through a lot," Collins murmured to Jack, probably in shock. Jack nodded, but something about the boy's conviction gave him pause. He peered into the damaged den entrance, where his flashlight beam revealed nothing but shadows. "Can you see anything in there?" Collins asked. "Not clearly," Jack admitted, "but something's definitely in there." He straightened up, reaching for his radio. "We need to get Ethan back to his parents and get him checked out. I'll call Fish and Wildlife to send someone out to investigate the den." Ethan, however, wasn't ready to leave. "But you promised," he protested, tears welling in his eyes. "Spots is hurt. She needs help now." Jack placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Ethan, if there is a bobcat in there, especially one with kittens, we need special people to help her. People who know how to take care of wild animals. We'll make sure they come right away." The logic of this seemed to penetrate Ethan's distress. He nodded reluctantly, allowing Jack to wrap an emergency blanket around his shoulders. "Can I come back to check on her?" he asked, his voice small. "We'll see," Jack answered diplomatically as he lifted the boy into his arms. "First, let's get you back to your mom and dad." The journey back to the command post was considerably faster than the night-long search had been. Jack carried Ethan most of the way, the boy's slight weight nothing compared to the burden of responsibility that had weighed on him throughout the night. As they walked, Ethan recounted his extraordinary tale: the initial encounter with the bear, Luna's unexpected intervention, sheltering in the hollow log during the storm, and finally, the birth of the kittens and the second bear attack. The search team listened with expressions ranging from indulgent smiles to outright disbelief. Only Jack seemed to consider that there might be some truth to the boy's fantastic story. "The den entrance was definitely damaged by a bear," he observed quietly to Collins as they neared the ranger station, "and something is in there." "Probably just a bobcat den the bear was trying to raid," Collins replied with a shrug. The boy was lucky to find shelter, and his mind filled in the rest. Jack nodded, but doubt lingered. There had been something about the precision of Ethan's description, details a 6-year-old shouldn't know about bobcat behavior, that nagged at his professional skepticism. At the ranger station, a cheer went up as the search team emerged from the forest, with Ethan in Jack's arms. Rebecca and David Reynolds rushed forward, their faces transformed by relief and joy as they reclaimed their son in a tearful embrace. "Mom, Dad," Ethan cried, suddenly just a little boy again as he clung to his parents. "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" Rebecca asked through her tears, her hands moving over him as if to reassure herself that he was really there, really whole. "I'm okay," Ethan assured her. "Spots took care of me." "Spots?" David asked, looking questioningly at Jack over his son's head. Before Jack could explain, Ethan launched into his story again. The bear, the brave Bobcat, the storm, the kittens. His parents listened with the patient indulgence of adults hearing a child's fantastical tale, relief overshadowing any concern about his apparent delusions. The medical team that had been standing by moved in to examine Ethan, checking for hypothermia, dehydration, and injuries. To everyone's amazement, apart from minor scratches, mild dehydration, and exhaustion, the boy was in remarkably good condition, far better than anyone had dared hope after a night alone in the wilderness. As Ethan was being examined, Jack stepped away to make a call to the Montana Fish and Wildlife Department. Despite his scientific training and natural skepticism, he couldn't shake the feeling that there might be more to the boy's story than an overactive imagination. 20 minutes later, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the department's leading wildlife biologist, arrived with a small team equipped for animal rescue. "Jack," she greeted him with professional warmth, "quite a night you've had. Fill me in on what we're dealing with." As Jack explained the situation, the damaged den, Ethan's incredible story, and the certainty that something injured was inside, Elena's expression shifted from polite interest to intense curiosity. "The boy claims a bobcat defended him from a bear?" she asked, her scientific mind already racing with possibilities. "And then led him to her den where she gave birth?" "That's his story," Jack confirmed. "I know how it sounds, but children rarely fabricate such specific details," Elena finished for him. "And there was definitely a bobcat in that den? You saw it?" "Not clearly," Jack admitted. "But something's in there, and the entrance shows signs of a serious confrontation." Elena nodded decisively. "Let's check it out. If there is an injured bobcat with newborns, we need to act quickly." While the biologists prepared their equipment, Ethan sat wrapped in blankets on his mother's lap, sipping hot chocolate as a paramedic checked his vital signs. Despite his ordeal, his main concern remained elsewhere. "Are they going to help Spots?" he asked repeatedly, looking toward where Jack stood with Elena's team. Rebecca stroked his hair, exchanging worried glances with David. "Honey, sometimes when we're scared, our minds create stories to help us feel better. It's okay if that happened." Ethan pulled away, his expression suddenly serious beyond his years. "It's not made up, Mom. Spots is real. She saved me. She got hurt because of me." Tears welled in his eyes. "They have to help her." Before Rebecca could respond, Elena approached, kneeling to Ethan's level with a gentle smile. "Hi, Ethan. I'm Dr. Elena. I take care of wild animals. Jack tells me you met a very special bobcat." The boy nodded eagerly, recognizing an ally. "Her name is Spots. She has 3 babies, and she's hurt really bad." Instead of the indulgent smile adults had been giving him, Elena nodded seriously. "I believe you, Ethan. Animals sometimes do extraordinary things that we don't fully understand. I'm going to go check on Spots and her kittens right now." "Can I come?" Ethan asked immediately. Elena looked to his parents, who shook their heads firmly. "Not right now," she told him gently, "but I promise to come back and tell you everything we find." "Deal?" "Deal," Ethan agreed reluctantly. As Elena's team headed into the forest with Jack leading the way, David pulled the ranger coordinator aside. "Should we be concerned about our son's story? Is this normal after trauma?" The coordinator, who had seen many lost children over her career, considered the question carefully. Children process fear in different ways, but in my experience, Ethan seems remarkably well adjusted considering what he's been through. Give him time. An hour later, Jack returned to the ranger station alone, his expression thoughtful as he approached the Reynolds family. Ethan immediately bombarded him with questions about Spots and her kittens. Dr. Elena is still with them, Jack explained, sitting down across from the family. Ethan, I owe you an apology. We all do. The adults looked confused, but Ethan simply waited, somehow knowing what was coming. There is indeed a female bobcat in that den, Jack continued. She's injured, claw marks consistent with a bear attack, and she has 3 newborn kittens just as you described. A collective gasp went up from those nearby, who had dismissed the boy's tale as fantasy. Ethan simply nodded as if this confirmation was unnecessary for what he already knew to be true. Is she going to be okay? He asked, the only question that mattered to him. Jack smiled. Dr. Elena thinks so. The injuries look worse than they are. She's treating her now. Antibiotics, fluids, wound care. The kittens are in good condition. What happens to them now? David asked, still processing this extraordinary turn of events. That's what I came to discuss, Jack said. Normally we'd minimize human interaction with wild animals, especially mothers with young. But this is unprecedented. The bobcat's behavior defies everything we understand about wildlife. Dr. Elena is suggesting a controlled study, monitoring the mother and kittens while documenting their recovery. And Ethan's involvement? Rebecca asked protectively. That's entirely up to you, Jack assured them. But Dr. Elena believes there's a genuine bond between your son and this particular bobcat, something extraordinary that could teach us about animal cognition and interspecies relationships. She'd like to interview Ethan, at minimum. Over the next 3 days, as Ethan recovered from his ordeal in the comfort of a hotel near the ranger station, Elena's team worked to stabilize Luna, the name they officially gave the bobcat, though Ethan insisted on still calling her Spots. A temporary field station was established near the den, allowing the biologists to provide medical care while minimizing disturbance to the small family. On the 4th day, Elena invited the Reynolds family to visit the observation post they had set up at a safe distance from the den. Through a specialized scope, Ethan could see Luna resting at the repaired entrance to her den, her 3 kittens nursing as she kept watchful eyes on the forest around them. She looks better, Ethan observed with the simple clarity of a child. She is, Elena confirmed. Her wounds are healing nicely, and she's taking excellent care of her kittens. Will she remember me? Ethan asked softly. Elena exchanged glances with his parents before answering carefully. Wildlife behavior is complex, Ethan. What happened between you and Spots was extraordinary, something that challenges everything we thought we knew about bobcats. But now she needs to be a wild mother to her wild kittens. Ethan nodded, wisdom beyond his years and his acceptance. She was just helping me until I could get back to my real family. Now she has her own family to take care of. 2 months later, Elena's preliminary findings were published in a wildlife biology journal, sending ripples of astonishment through the scientific community. The paper documented, with camera trap evidence and Ethan's detailed testimony, a case of cross-species protection that defied conventional understanding of predator behavior. Theories abounded. Some suggested Luna's previous rehabilitation exposure to humans had created unique neural pathways. Others pointed to hormonal influences from her pregnancy, temporarily extending maternal instincts beyond species boundaries. A few even proposed that certain animals, like certain humans, simply possessed extraordinary capacity for empathy. For the Reynolds family, returning to normal life took time. Ethan became something of a local celebrity, though his parents carefully shielded him from too much attention. The boy who had once been afraid of the dark now slept peacefully, his bedroom decorated with bobcat pictures and stuffed animals. 6 months after the incident, on a crisp autumn day, the Reynolds family made a special trip back to Blackwater Forest. With special permission and under Elena's supervision, they hiked to a ridge overlooking the valley where Luna and her now half-grown kittens had been tracked. Through binoculars, they watched the small family moving through the undergrowth. The kittens nearly as large as their mother now, learning to hunt and survive in the wild. Luna paused suddenly, her head turning toward their observation point as if sensing their presence across the distance. "She knows we're here," Ethan whispered with absolute certainty. For a long moment the bobcat stared in their direction, her golden eyes seemingly finding Ethan despite the distance. Then, with a flick of her spotted tail, she led her kittens deeper into the forest, disappearing into the wilderness that was her home. "Goodbye, Spots," Ethan said softly, a bittersweet smile on his face. "Thank you for saving me." As they turned to head back, Rebecca noticed something in her son's expression, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before his ordeal. Somehow, in the most unlikely circumstances, a wild bobcat had given her child a gift beyond measure, the knowledge that courage, compassion, and connection could be found in the most unexpected places, transcending the boundaries between species and challenging what we think we know about the natural world. In the years that followed, Luna and her offspring became the most studied bobcat family in scientific history. Camera traps documented their lives, building a unique record that continued to challenge conventional wisdom about wildlife behavior. Though Luna never again approached humans, researchers noted she showed none of the typical bobcat avoidance behaviors when research teams were nearby, as if she had made her own peace with the human world that had once been so foreign. And Ethan, he grew up with an unshakable connection to the natural world, eventually following a path that would surprise no one who knew his story, becoming a wildlife biologist specializing in predator behavior, dedicated to understanding the complex and beautiful mysteries of the creatures with whom we share this planet. Sometimes, when asked about his career choice, he would simply smile and say, "I once knew a very special bobcat who taught me that we still have so much to learn."